Thank you, Kyle. No, I don't need that. As he mentioned, my name is Ben Lamont, and I'm Grimes County Judge. I'm also chairman of Texans Against High-Speed Rail. And again, I thank each of you for being here tonight. I'm going to focus, switch gears, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the regulatory landscape and the eminent domain issue. And it's important to understand that before I begin, all major infrastructure projects that utilize eminent domain in the state of Texas go through a very rigorous process where the project is vetted, validated, and ends up going through this process to justify the use of that eminent domain. And they do that process prior to the construction, prior to beginning that construction, but also prior to utilizing eminent domain. So what I hope, my goal here tonight, and what I hope you walk away from here thinking, is I want to demonstrate to you that Texas Central Partners, as an entity, has been doing every single thing they possibly can to circumvent that process, to deny the process that validates the project and justifies the use of eminent domain. It's a very important concept in the state of Texas. In Texas, the end does not justify the means with eminent domain. You must go through the appropriate process. And I think all of us would agree with that, whether you're for the project or against it. So let's get started. We'll start off with the regulatory landscape. The first attempt at TCP, I'm going to call them TCP, Texas Central Partners, of circumventing that process is when they filed a petition with the Surface Transportation Board earlier this year. This first petition was a petition for clarification. The rules require that before you begin construction, you must have approval of the product. This petition for clarification requested that the definition of construction not include utilizing the eminent domain process. So a very clever way to say, hey, we can start kicking people, start the process of condemning properties all the way up to the point where they have to cut a check, but not cut the check, but still go through that, put that homeowner through that whole process. All of that could happen before the route is approved, before the project is approved, before they go through the financial scrutiny. It seemed very backwards to me, but they failed at that attempt. That's the first attempt. Second attempt was a petition for a waiver of exemption, a petition for exemption of certain regulations with the Surface and Transportation Board as well. These regulations also have to occur. This is call it a parallel path to the same ends. This regulation system requires that a sequence of events occur in order prior to using eminent domain, and this waiver would allow them to, again, condemn properties prior to getting the project approved, regardless of the definition of construction. So they failed at that attempt. Then they go to the third attempt. They then request in that same filing, they request the federal government to claim jurisdiction over this project. And that's important. Why would they do that? Because the reason why is because of preemptive law. So if they were successful in getting those two petitions passed, then this preemptive law would allow that to basically bulldoze over the state laws that they preempt. Okay, so federal law preempts state law preempts local law, and that was the goal. Well, they lost that. That were denied those petitions. The federal government gave them a stiff arm and said, no, we're not touching this with a 10-foot pole. We don't want anything to do with it. Go back to Texas, and good luck there. So that was the third attempt. So they pivot and turn to Texas. Naturally, what should have happened is there should have been an engagement effort between Texas Central Partners and the state of Texas, requesting, obviously, a 240-mile long land burn, largely a land burn, initially mainly a land burn, with going across half the state of Texas. Who here thinks that it's appropriate to have zero regulation for a project like that? Zero oversight, zero approval. Who in the world, besides Texas Central Partners, believes that? I don't think for a minute anybody does, even proponents of it. So what did they do? They publicly announced, actually, we don't need any approval from the state of Texas. We are self-declaring, we're declaring that we are approving construction of this project. We have validated it. We're not sharing any of that information with the public, but we validated it, trust us, and by the way, we have eminent domain. And so that was the fourth attempt to circumvent the eminent domain process that all these major infrastructure projects go through. And that's where it stands today. That's where they're at. That's their position right now. The funny thing is Texas Central Partners is well aware that in the 80s, which was the last time a high-speed rail project was proposed in the state of Texas, that the state legislature, in their wisdom, created a state agency called Texas High-Speed Rail Authority. It was like TxDOT, or like the Public Utility Commission, the PUC. This is a state agency that regulates and oversees and approves, has the authority to approve or disapprove the project. It puts every project through a rigorous examination, including financial feasibility and all kinds of things like that, and then makes a final determination. Yes, we will grant you. We have studied it. We believe this project is in the best interest of the citizens, and we will grant you eminent domain authority and allow you to use that. Okay. So at that time, that project failed miserably. Like this project, the financial feasibility was not there. The project went away, and ultimately the state legislature repealed that statute that created that state agency, and that agency disappeared. It went away. And so it doesn't exist today. So they believe, as a result of that, that there is no state regulation that should happen. There is no state approval. Let me rephrase that statement. There is no state approval required. That they do not need anything, any approval from the state of Texas to construct that project. They're on public record saying that. So, shifting gears to the eminent domain, more focus on the eminent domain question, which is, do they have it? We'll talk about some further attempts where they are trying to circumvent this process. It's important to understand there are mainly two ways that entities get eminent domain. First is through a state agency like TxDOT or the PUC that has the authority granted to it by the state legislature by passing a law that gives them that ability, or statute, gives them that ability to give eminent domain to an entity, a private entity. They will admit they have never received eminent domain authority from any state or federal agency, period. There's no dispute there. What they claim is they have obtained it through the other way, which is directly from a state statute, from a law a bill that's been passed in the legislation and turned into law, and that provides eminent domain authority directly to a group of entities without going through some type of state agency. And so let's just drill down on that for just a minute. This has to do with Texas Transportation Code chapters 81, chapter 112, and chapter 131. Chapter 81 defines a railroad. Chapter 112 talks about how a railroad can use eminent domain, when it can use eminent domain, directly as a result of the statute. And chapter 131 is about interurban electric rail. So focusing on chapter 112, where in 81, where it qualifies a railroad and when a railroad can use eminent domain, it has two qualifiers, and it's an either-or situation. Either the railroad was incorporated before 2007, obviously for that purpose, which this entity was not. They were incorporated in 2012. There's no debate there. They don't qualify under that. I haven't heard them represent that they qualify under that statute. And the other one is where the debate is. The other qualifier says any other legal entity operating a railroad. Now TCR will claim that they're operating a railroad. And when you drill down and under oath and you ask them about this railroad, they said it hasn't taken physical form yet. That's under oath. A railroad, they're operating a railroad that hasn't taken physical form yet. They will say, we are working really hard. We're spending millions of dollars. We're talking to state agencies, federal agencies. We're meeting. We're designing things. We're doing things like that. look at Merriam-Webster definition. Railroad, a system of tracks on which trains travel. That's the definition of a railroad. I don't see anywhere anything about that. What they're trying to claim is they're operating a railroad company. You don't get eminent domain just because you and I decide we're going to operate a railroad company and we file a couple of documents with the state of Texas and all of a sudden we have eminent domain. Is that even reasonable to think that that could happen? So a railroad is a system of tracks on which trains travel. It's also defined as a company that owns and operates a train or trains. TCP is represented under oath that they do not own any trains. They do not own any tracks or have them. And they don't have any trains running on any tracks. In fact, sorry about that. In fact, they have raised less than 1% of the money needed to build, to construct, and operate this train. Less than one to construct and, to buy the trains and construct the train tracks. Less than 1%. Yet, they are trying to utilize eminent domain to kick people out of their home. They don't have the financial capacity lined up. They do not have the money, the financing in place as it stands today or last Friday. They do not have the financing in place to construct this train. Okay. I'll move on. So, at the end of the day, there were 7 attempts, and they failed on all of those attempts. And so what is this real issue about? The eminent domain issue is about this. It's about not allowing a private entity that's for profit to circumvent the very important process that protects our private property rights. And this process is required for all other major infrastructure projects. And I hope I've proven to you that not only does Texas Central not have eminent domain, but they know they don't have eminent domain. And that's important because they know they don't have it, yet they're out there sending letters to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of citizens, threatening to file suit on them, representing that they have eminent domain, without ever providing any documentation that they have it. They don't say where they're getting it from, which the Land Bill of Rights require. Yes, sir. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.